Why are black people in the US called African Americans and not just Americans? A long time ago I had a student from Kenya. He came to me asking what to check off on a form. He said he can't check African American because he is not American. I said yeah, it is a really stupid term. So suggested other and writing Black African. The term African American was coined because black descendants of slaves were stripped of their heritage and languages. We have no way of knowing what countries in Africa we originated from. Only that our ancestors came from somewhere on the African continent. So we can't use terms similar to Irish American or Italian American like most people can because we have no home country to reference. Honestly, as a black American, I prefer to be called black. I've never been to Africa and can trace my family roots in the US for over 200 years. African American is quite dated and will probably eventually be seen as similar to calling us Negroes and colored emo. America's racial history led us to it. There was a time when the polite term was colored people or Negro and that evolved into African American or black people. They would be considered Americans, but some might call themselves African American. It's all a hangover from our troubled past. They can be referred to as either. It's not an exclusionary thing. African American is a distinct culture that developed when lots of Africans were hauled to America and had their various cultures erased and intermingled and developed into a new culture in a new situation. It's an internal thing, which a person from that background may or may not identify with. Black is black, whether your family has been here for 200 years, first as slaves, then as African Americans, or whether you've just moved here from another country yesterday and have a totally different cultural background. If you're black, people see that and view you differently and society treats you differently. It's an external thing, regardless of how you see yourself and your culture. But it's something you share with all other black people here. This is made confusing by the fact that some people say African American to refer to all black people, regardless of cultural background, because they were taught that it's more polite. And also because many black people don't really like the term African American, and instead choose to refer to themselves as black. So how you refer to yourself is your choice. And how others refer to you may or may not match that. As for Euro-Americans, some of them also refer to their ancestors' origin and call themselves Italian or Irish or whatever, while others don't. As for me, I'm a mutt mix. And for Native Americans, some like that term because it's inclusive. Others hate it because it doesn't recognize their tribe, and refer to themselves by their tribal name instead, while others prefer Indian. We're a melting pot here, and most everyone's identity is complex. It would be much easier to just all agree to be Americans. But the combo of different cultures and backgrounds and the different ways that society views and treats people kinda necessitates lots of different ways to describe ourselves and each other. They are called Americans. They are called African Americans when that is important, just like how European Americans and Native Americans are called that when that is an important distinction. It's also like that with, for example, Italian Americans when talking about that group of European Americans. It was a politically correct move from words like Negro or black. Many black people actually favored it. For example, here is a Kana page from an anti-racist comic from the 90s, Colors in Black, where it said, "We may never really decide whether we want to be called https://2.bp blogspot.com/iviv3p2wqc6mtxqc9 trimdes 6 bk8g54 ltn9 yadelnitzqflofhyumve 2 ktwkngslxfh4 lls0b EPEGGUQG11 BMGQQVMGFXKRGEG 145416 MCYA0 JPJH1P31 PWYDPRDF3Q equals S1600 ReLupa equals MTK3 LJIZNY43 NS4XMZK equals an RNVUKA equals TW96A WXSYS81 LJAG KFDPBMRVD3 MGTLQGMTA UMDSGV2 LunjaQ7 IHG2 NCKGQXBWBGVXC WJLAXQVNTM3 LJM2 ICHLSFRNTC WGBGLRZSBHCWNRBYKGQ2HYB21 ILZMC4 WLJAUMCBTY WZHCMKVNTM3 LJM2 like Irish Americans, Italian Americans, etc. The term African American specifically relates to dark-skinned descendants of enslaved people brought to the United States for that purpose. For the vast majority, their ancestral line is severed there, and they do not and cannot know where their forebears came from or what tribe they were members of. Their cultural identity begins on these shores and goes back no further. The slave trade not only stole freedom from Black Americans, it stole their history. Teddy Roosevelt spoke on this a long time ago, in his hyphenated American speech, though his main target was all the various European nationalities. Well, there are several names: the American Negro, antiquated but still used by many historical Black groups, like the United Negro College Fund, Black Americans, to differentiate between descendants of those who endured slavery and those who actually came from Africa after slavery was ended. Blacks had to form insular communities. It's not surprising that they would feel separate. The modern nomenclature, though possibly not conducive to complete integration today, is perhaps a historical reminder of past errors. Modern politics on either side doesn't help. You probably won't see this, but I'll comment. I like how all these people with zero knowledge of the subject matter are running their mouths. We started calling ourselves African Americans in the 1980s because as a group it was the designation we felt most comfortable with. You have to understand that when this country was founded, we were not generally considered Americans and even had our humanity questioned. In the early days of this country, we were typically either slaves or N-ers. As we started to try and assert a cohesive identity, we tried on different labels. We went through a few labels: Negro, Colored, Black, and eventually African American. Personally, I think African American is a great improvement over where things started, because Americans are uncomfortable using the word Black. Black man here. In America, Black folks don't describe or call each other African American. We call each other Black. AA was something that white Americans came up with as a politically correct term. There are Caribbean Black Americans that don't refer to themselves as African American, just American. So explain to a stupid European, how many generations do you have to live in the US before you are only called American? And is Musk also called African American? African American is a specific ethnic group from the United States. As a group, they are generally the descendants of slaves brought from Africa throughout the country's early history. Not all black people in the US are African American, such as recent immigrants. People in the African American ethnic group have their own cultures, dialects, music, film, literature, cuisine, and histories. It's also important to note that not all African American people use the term themselves. It's most useful in the context of sociology and ethnography. The hyphenation of X-American comes from a tradition of the American identity being about ideology, rather than national origin. The first part is your ancestry and the second part is to signify you have adopted the American liberal ideology. We use the same for others as well, but over time they often just become white, Irish American, Italian American, etc. It is happening with African American too, with many black people being annoyed because they don't consider themselves African after being into their 10th generation in America when there are white people who've been here for 3 generations who don't have to be qualified like that. African American refers to ethnicity and/or culture. American is nationality. Both apply. I genuinely don't know a single black person who prefers to be called African American. That's what we're told to say in school, but black people here just say black people. It's generally seen as a bit of a red flag when someone refers to a black person as an African American, because it puts an asterisk on their citizenship. We don't ever call white people here European Americans, and aren't ever taught to say that in conversation, but multiple generations have now been taught to say African American when nobody actually wants to be called that. Same reason I'm a Jewish American, it's just an ethnic subdivision. That being said, the specific language isn't used unless it's relevant. Like if you're specifically referring to African Americans or Asian Americans, etc., you wouldn't make any distinction otherwise. If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epicaricast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.